One of the most important ways that we can be sustainable with direct mail is to ensure that we have clean data. And so the data really plays into making sure that a campaign isn't just a generalized mass mailing, but actually personalized and targeted so that you know that when you're sending mail, there is going to be ROI on it. And it's not just another piece of junk mail. And I think that's really important from a sustainability perspective is you can invest in all of these raw materials and the production delivery. But a lot of times it comes back to making sure that your data is clean and you are ready to target the right audience.
Today we have a very special episode. We actually have two guests on. First, Christina Louie Dyer, Head of Social Impact and Sustainability at Lob is here. Christina recently launched Lob's carbon neutral direct mail offering, which is tremendously exciting for a channel that previously, really for many providers don't, affect this kind of visibility into the work they're doing. And we'll be talking more about that during the show. And additionally, given the topic of conversation today, not just being around direct mail, but also around, environmental considerations, sustainability, we also have Shela Wu, who, heads analytics at Simon Data by day. And at night is our chair for the Simon Data Green Network. So I'd love to just, you guys can just, say hi and introduce yourselves to our listeners.
Great. Shela, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So like Jason said, I'm Shela. I lead the Green Network here at Simon, which is our sustainability ERG. And I'm also on the analytics team and very excited to join the conversation today.
Great, Shela.
Awesome. And hi, everyone. I'm Christina Louie Dyer. As Jason mentioned, I lead our social impact and sustainability work here at Lob through lob.org, and I am thrilled to be here today.
Fantastic. So, let's kick off. I connected with Christina earlier in the summer. Simon Data has actually been partners with Lob for quite some time, and we really had a great conversation. That started with this question of when you look at your marketing mix. You might be you're probably buying ads on Facebook, and you're certainly probably sending some emails. How can direct mail play into this approach, and really how does that fit into your broader channel strategy? But that's sort of the first half of the conversation. The second half of the conversation is just thinking about how should you think holistically around direct mail. Obviously, this starts with the blocking and tackling around ROI, channel coordination, and really ends with a topic that for me is personally very important, and that's the environment and sustainability. And Lob's done some tremendous work around this, and we'll be diving into that as well. So Christina, to kick things off, why don't we maybe just start with some examples and what it looks like, to effectively use direct mail and why, and why folks should think about incorporating direct mail into their channel strategy today.
Absolutely. Direct mail is really an essential part of any marketing strategy these days. Marketers can really think about direct mail as part of or should be thinking about direct mail as part of their omni-channel marketing strategy when they're thinking about acquiring, converting, and retaining customers, because, as all of these various channels are on the rise, there is a lot of digital fatigue. The inbox is really becoming kind of the new junk mail, and social is noisy and display is saturated. And so it's nearly impossible to market effectively using a single channel, right? All of these are important and they need to be integrated. And direct mail is one of those. And, consumers are increasingly craving the tangible. In fact, we've seen that about 67% of people really see physical mail as being more personal than email. And 90% of millennials think that direct mail is more trustworthy and reliable. Lob actually just recently ran a report called the State of Direct Mail Consumer Insights Report. And we found that over 85% of consumers regularly read direct mail. And so I feel like folks think about direct mail sometimes as this, dying, antiquated channel, when really it still has a huge impact. And people love to have that tangible moment, especially when so much of that is happening in a digital world. I mean, even most conversations these days over Zoom. And so, when you think about direct mail and taking this digital and physical channel and working them in tandem, it really actually, we've seen a lot of studies that this can really increase overall marketing ROI because you're reaching a wider audience, you're hitting them across different touch points. And that's really powerful. When marketers use email with direct mail, there's actually a 27% increase in response rates. And so, I think about that, Jason, what's, one of your favorite places to shop?
Where do I like to shop? I'll buy some clothes, some jeans on occasion from Rag & Bone.
Okay, perfect. So let's say yesterday or tomorrow, you're, shopping, you see this great pair of jeans. It's been a while. I know we can keep jeans for a long time, which is great. You put it in your cart, but it sounds like you have kids, you get distracted. So it just sits in your cart and you likely forget about it. I have a 6-month-old, and as soon as something's in my cart and I'm distracted, I'm never going back to make that purchase unless, it sits in your cart for a little while. It's a place you've shopped before. And so, it might trigger an email. So you might get that email a couple of days later and you're like, okay, I'm going to go check out. But then of course you get distracted again. Well, what that can then do is trigger a postcard with a picture of that pair of jeans you were looking at. And so a couple of days later, you get that postcard and suddenly you remember, okay, this is the second time I've heard about this pair of jeans. I need to go back, and that postcard might sit on your counter. And so even if you don't do it right away, you'll come back. And so there's a higher likelihood, right, that you're going to go purchase that pair of jeans. It might take a few times, but in this very distracted world, that combination of email and that automated postcard, right, that can help bring you or anyone back to the shopping cart to check out. And so I think that's a really good example of how these tools can really work in tandem. And, I think direct mail has also historically been seen as this, traditionally arduous process, and it's slow. And so that's where Lob comes into play, or, a direct mail platform like Lob, so that it can become, again, a really easily automated channel that marketers can tap into as part of their, marketing tech stack. It's another tool that they're using that is quick and easy and simple to actually send a direct piece of mail, not the 3 months that it used to be, but as simple as, a few days, that postcard will arrive in your inbox. Or your mailbox. So that's a good way of just thinking about how, again, all of these different channels really work well together.
Yep. And certainly speaking as a consumer, I sort of feel as if, the mornings I wake up and wade through my email and I'm just like, oh, I got to get to the bottom of this. But I'll get home from work, fish the mail out of the mailbox, put it on the counter. I may not get to it for a few days, but when I do, I'm drinking a cup of coffee. It's a very different experience. And I think, it's not surprising that the data around the incrementality around using multi-channels with direct mail is what it is. Obviously, a big part of Simon Data's perspective on the market is to execute on that multi-channel strategy. So to make sure that the personalization assets, as you described, are can be executed consistently across the channels that include email and include direct mail and include anything else. So we have many direct shared customers that use Lob with our platform. So that's great.
Absolutely. Yeah, we actually have a shared customer I know that just recently ran a campaign to reach out to unsubscribers to help bring them back. And so there's a lot of power, again, in the partnership that we have and being able to kind of integrate our technologies.
Yep. No, that's great. So maybe we can talk about the environmental impact. I know folks will look at direct mail and they'll be like, well, this used to be a tree. Christina, you and I were joking, any other form of digital marketing also has costs in terms of the environmental footprint as well. But I know you've been doing a lot of work here, and I'm going to pass it over to Shela to ask some questions around that we're looking to learn more about it and how you think about it.
Yeah. So Christina, I know you do a lot of work around understanding what is Lob's footprint and assessing how to offset accordingly. Which I think, by the way, is such admirable work. For companies who do want to turn a more reflective eye on themselves and also, assess what is their environmental impact, what guidance would you give to start that process, and how should they be thinking about their footprint?
Absolutely. It is a process. It's a journey. And so I would recommend starting with a materiality assessment. So I don't know if you've done that already or if you're thinking about that, but essentially it's usually an ESG, so environmental social governance materiality assessment. And what it helps you do is actually identify the most material issues for the organization. And I think that's really important because there is so much you can tackle, right? And depending on your service and what you're offering, locations, there's so many factors. And so really honing in on what is most material to your organization and how do you really make sure that you're going after the most impactful areas. And so starting with that materiality assessment is really important. Then, I would say developing a point of view for why you're starting to calculate this and who your target audience is. Again, we have a lot of stakeholders, right? Is this for employees? Is this for investors? Is this for customers? Is it for everyone? Depending on who you're trying to reach and who you're reporting out to, that conversation is going to shift a little bit, or the way you're thinking about measurements might shift a little bit. And then, while you can do some of this work in-house, I definitely think you probably know already, if I say, what are your most material issue areas, you could probably name them. But, as you continue to grow, it definitely helps to have a third party who can validate that, and you can look to and help to, again, verify all of the work and validate all the work that you've done, because you really want to make sure you're not really greenwashing. I think that is another piece of the conversation that folks are worried about, because there have been companies recently that have been called out. And so you want to make sure that the data that you're gathering is really validated by that third party. And then I'd say internally, this can't happen in a silo. And so this for me is, I think the biggest piece is, I think a lot of times you're like, oh, you're head of sustainability. Great. So what are we going to go do? And the reality is it's a company-wide effort, right? I get to help manage and advise on how we approach this, but it only happens if we bring in all the various stakeholders, because the data that you need to measure your carbon footprint lives in so many different places, internally, again, with the rest of your value chain. So there's just a lot that goes into this, and having that partnership and buy-in across the business, and then again, up and down, is just incredibly important. So that's what I would say is materiality assessment, develop a point of view, know who your stakeholders are, and then ultimately make sure you're partnering across the organization.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like that focus on like what we should do internally. For brands who do work with other vendors, are there specific questions that they should be asking them to kind of get that full picture understanding of their footprint?
What's great is, because this is something that is on the rise, like I feel like so many organizations are really starting to think about sustainability if they haven't already. And so you're seeing, I think I saw the other day, like 92% of Fortune 500 companies are publishing a sustainability report. There are potential disclosures that are proposed by the SEC on the horizon around, climate related risks, emissions, and net zero transition plans. So we're going to see some of this mandated, like we've seen in other countries and other parts of the world. But, I think the first question is just understanding if they have that report. A lot of times it's public and it's something you can dig into. It's incredibly dense, but it's out there. And if that isn't readily available, there are questions that I would recommend asking. And I'm also happy to share kind of a list, but, anything around understanding, one, if they've started any of these calculations, if they understand what their current impacts are around their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, what their energy and water sources are, the actions that they're currently taking to reduce energy, water, and other chemical usage. What raw materials do they use? Where do they come from? What do their data centers look like? What kind of energy is being used? Are their products certified by a third party, or are they aligning to a certain standard? So again, I can go on and on, but there are a lot of questions you can ask, and obviously some of that they will readily share, and others, they may not hold closer to their chest. But I think as we continue to talk about the climate impacts of all of our, work, and again, digital doesn't necessarily mean it's green. So all of us are kind of digging into that. We're going to see that data more readily available, and we'll have a better sense of what those carbon footprints are.
Got it. That's a really already solid list of questions that you already gave out to us. Continuing to think externally, for companies who want to work with external partners, whether it's some type of nonprofit, can you talk me through how that process goes? How do you find the right fit for that?
There are so many. And again, one size does not fit all. And I've seen, again, what might work for a really, really large organization may not be what makes most sense for you. So I think, again, it goes back to that materiality assessment and understanding what those material issues are that you're looking to tackle. And then identifying key partners that you can potentially work with. So our journey, from a law perspective, started early on. So before we had measured our footprint or really knew what the greenhouse gas emissions were for each kind of mail piece that we send, we, since 2018, have been working with Eden reforestation projects, because we knew very clearly that we use paper for for our mail. And so since 2018, we've been planting 2 trees for every one that we use. And that was the tip of the iceberg, right? So that was a very visible way that we were impacting the environment. And we knew that at some point we were going to dig deeper, which is where the carbon neutrality conversation came into play. But that was a really great partner for us because we vetted and looked into how they think about reforestation. So that was a good fit for us. There are many organizations, again, along those lines, but again, we tied it closely to what are the impacts that we're having. And for us, it was paper and forestry. And so reforestation was very closely aligned. So I think it's important to think about how the offsets or the projects that you're investing in actually closely align with the impacts that your organization has as well, so that it's not just completely separate. As we're thinking about this carbon neutral mail, we're working with a third party. So we are going to be working with Climate Impact Partners, and they have a number of projects that are well vetted. Like they have teams that are vetting each individual project very heavily, so that we know that there is transparency and it's been validated. And so we know where, when we're purchasing offsets, where that's going, and we can actually track the progress. So again, there are a lot of nonprofits and for-profit organizations that you can work with. And it really is a matter of like, what is it that you are tangibly affecting? And then, what makes the most sense for your organization at this stage?
Got it. I believe that you had mentioned before that you have gotten this was on a separate conversation, but that you got your carbon footprint data. And I did want to learn a little bit more about, for you, how do you calculate that? How do you transform that data to understand your footprint?
Absolutely. So this is, again, where we worked with a third party because we wanted to make sure that we had subject matter experts. And again, at the end of the day, that when we were talking about our data, that it was third party validated. And so we worked with SCS Consulting. We worked with them actually over the past almost year now. So we started first with looking at our scope 1 and 2 emissions, which are pretty minimal. And then we knew that based on our materiality assessment, that the majority of our emissions were going to be in our product. So product sustainability came up as the number one area for our assessment that we needed to really tackle if we wanted to think about sustainability as a whole and making material impacts there. So we brought on SCS Consulting, and what they've done is partnered with us and our print partners, all of the suppliers that we work with, to really understand from raw materials all the way through disposal, what the entire journey is for a piece of mail, and then what those impacts are. So it's a pretty long process, right? We had to gather a lot of data from various sources. And that took about 4 months because we work with a number of print partners. We leveraged the USPS data, which is readily available for folks on the footprint of that delivery aspect of the mail. And so once we had all of those pieces, we could then look at our 2021 numbers of mail volume sent against all of the different inputs of what goes into a mail piece from production to delivery and then ultimately disposal, which is a cradle to grave analysis. And so we went through this life cycle assessment. And at the end of the day, we're able to now understand down to the grams per mail piece of CO2 emissions.
Got it. That's awesome. I love to follow that process. And I love how you also brought in like all these different data sources, whether it was through that third party that you worked with or just by yourself to kind of come and arrive to this footprint analysis. So I think that's all the questions from me. It was really great to talk to you, Christina. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. And before we transition into the final question around folks who are looking to use direct mail, are there any other questions you should ask around the efforts that you're doing from a sustainability perspective, or did we cover most of everything?
No, we covered all of that. I think, again, sometimes folks will ask, well, is this so much more, or is direct mail a larger footprint than email? And I think in a one-to-one comparison, right, it is, but I'm not trying to villainize any sort of channel, right? Again, these work really well hand in hand. And exactly. We get about 120 emails a day with, about a footprint of about 4 grams. So if you think about that, it's a much smaller footprint, but we get a lot of it. And we typically get about 15 to 20, right. Each household in the US gets about 15 to 20 mail pieces per week, but it's a higher footprint, right? It's about 30 to 50 grams. But if you look at it overall, it's actually not that large of a delta, right? And so I think that's where we want to reemphasize that direct mail can be a renewable resource, right? The paper gets recycled well, and it doesn't just sit in a data center somewhere. And so there's this opportunity, again, to use these hand in hand without thinking that one channel is superior to the other, especially from a sustainability perspective.
All right. So, Christina, for any of our listeners who are looking to expand into direct mail, what's your advice on how should they be thinking about this?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it's really important to start thinking about this as another channel as part of this, omni-channel strategy. And my colleague Kim has a great analogy where she talks about your digital and your physical, like a PB&J, that they go best together. Folks might have different opinions depending on how they feel about either peanut butter and jelly, but as a whole, that it really is strongest when they are together. And so neither is meant to act in a silo, but again, really integrate with other channels. As I also mentioned earlier, I think some of the concern or maybe the hesitation with direct mail is that it has been this arduous process, but it really doesn't have to be, right? That's where Lob comes in and other, really to think about how this is automated as part of a marketer's tech stack. And so we want to make it, or we do make it as easy as possible for folks to bring this into their outreach strategy. And so it doesn't have to be that 3-month process where you work with a printer and it takes a long time, but actually it's with our, platform, super easy to use. Anyone can jump in and start to build their first campaign. Again, it really helps that we get to work with great partners. We integrate with a number of different technologies that folks are likely already using. And so again, this is meant to be a seamless transition. And we really feel that if you can bring direct mail into your strategy, it is one of the most effective channels. Again, we were talking about kind of the stats about that earlier, but we want to make it easy for folks to use from print all the way to delivery, but also to give data around it. I think that's another reason that folks have sometimes been hesitant to use direct mail is sometimes it falls into this silo and it's hard to measure, but we have tools that actually allow for you to understand, again, the analytics and the ROI for each campaign. And so no, it's no longer this, a mysterious channel, but actually something you can measure and report out on and show, again, the direct ROI. One of the most important ways that we can be sustainable with direct mail is to ensure that we have clean data. And so the data really plays into making sure that a campaign isn't just a generalized mass mailing, but actually personalized and targeted so that that when you're sending mail, there is going to be ROI on it. And it's not just another piece of junk mail. And I think that's really important from a sustainability perspective is you can invest in all of these raw materials and the production delivery. But a lot of times it comes back to making sure that your data is clean and you are ready to target the right audience. So that's one thing I like to make sure folks think about too, is it's not just all the pieces that go into a piece of mail, but at that very beginning to think about, who you're reaching out to and what the data looks like.
And that's great. And there's real alignment there between, what's in the best interest of your customer and what's in the best interest of the environment. The customer doesn't like to throw out a piece of irrelevant junk mail any more than anyone likes to pay for it, nor does anyone want to pay for the environmental side effects of that. Yeah, so obviously, sustainability and environmental considerations with global warming is a highly relevant topic today. Many folks are talking about it. And so, for the final question, Christina, if you were to have this conversation again, around the work you're doing at Lob with any leader in the world, who would it be and why?
It's a great question. And the first person that comes to mind, and this is probably because my husband was eating a pint of Ben & Jerry's last night, and I really admired kind of their stances on, how they've just led with their values and been unapologetically leaning into social justice. But Matthew McCarthy is Ben & Jerry's CEO. And, I really believe, especially being in the social impact and sustainability space, that businesses can be really powerful change makers. And Ben & Jerry's is a great example of that. They also have a lot of focus around, environmental justice and sustainability. And so I'd love to learn from them and understand really how that can continue to be integrated in our business as well.
Great. And Shela, you brought some great folks into Simon Data to talk about the topic. If you could talk to anyone, who would it be?
So I would actually reach out. I support this charity called the Red Panda Network. I've been supporting them since high school, actually. But I would just love to talk to them more so just because I think that there's a lot of nonprofits out there who don't leverage their data as much as they should. And I would love to just have a conversation to evaluate what are some of the pain points, what are some of the gaps that they would like to close and, work with them to kind of help them bridge that to better support the red pandas that are out there.
That's great. All righty. Thank you both for coming on the podcast today and sharing your wisdom with us. When I sort of reflect on the conversation, it's really one of asking, really one that starts with asking, what should your channel strategy be around your marketing strategy today? And really then just ends with thinking about the strategy holistically. And obviously, thinking about the customer experience, thinking about revenue, thinking about funnel efficiency. Those are all critical things to be thinking about. But it's also really important to be understanding the environmental impact of your marketing strategy as well. I think, Christina, the work that you're doing at Lob is just fantastic, and Lob has really been a leader in the space around thinking about the impacts on the environment and offsetting them accordingly as well. So really excited for everything to come, and I know you're relatively early in your journey still, so it'd be great to have you on a future episode at some point to talk about all the great work that you'll have had done in the time in between. So Christina, for anyone who wants to learn about Lob or about your work, where can they go and how can they learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jason. So you can go to lob.com to learn more about our, intelligent direct mail platform. And if you're curious about our sustainability efforts, we actually have a lob.com/sustainable direct mail to learn more about our carbon neutral journey.
That's great. And thank you for everyone listening to this episode of the Data Online podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Simon Data, please visit us on the web at simondata.com or email us at hello@simondata.com.